NFC is probably the most important pillar of Pakistan's fiscal federalism. G. NFC is the most important pillar of Pakistan's federalism. It is a very emotional topic for the provinces, and there is renewed debate on the National Finance Commission Award because the 11th National Finance Commission has been constituted. We have had the 7th NFC Award in place for 3 terms for a period of 15 years. The Constitution stipulates that every 5 years you should have a new commission and a new award. So this discussion is very relevant. Our goal today is to understand, basically, I would set the debate by asking these 3 questions. Number 1, where did the 7th National Finance Commission Award succeed? How have the pressures changed now that we're talking about the 11th NFC Award? And what would a forward-looking, evidence-based framework for intergovernmental transfer or revenue sharing look like in 2025 and beyond? We have an excellent panel starting from a former finance minister, an economist, an investor, businessman, and a finance secretary. So the way we will go about this panel, we have 45 minutes, and I would like to hear the panelists make opening statements of 5 to 6 minutes. So we cover that in about 20 to 25 minutes, and we leave the second half to an open house Q&A session. So Dr. Miftah Ismail, obviously the 3 questions that I posed, and also you were the finance minister, so you would also like to hear the challenges that a finance minister of Pakistan faces, and what do you think needs to be discussed in the 11th NFC Award?
Thank you, Ahmad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And thank you, Zilaf and Javed, for putting together such a wonderful show here. And it's a very impressive lineup of all the talks that you've done. I think that NFC Award is the NFC Award is something that is necessary for Pakistan. As you rightly said, it is the foundation or pillar of fiscal federalism. And because it's a foundation and pillar of the fiscal federalism, it's very important. But NFC Award has to ensure both that the federal and provincial governments work well. NFC Award also has to ensure that they are able to provide all the services they need to, but also ensure that the tax rates in Pakistan are not extortionary or exorbitant like they are now. And they also have to ensure that the deficits are not so high that we end up with a boom and bust cycle again and again and again that we are experiencing. At this time, of course, we have not yet had a boom, but we go through a boom and bust cycle. Just a little history. In 1997, the NFC Award for provinces was 37.5%. Then in the 2007, then in 2002, the NFC Award became 45% money going to the provinces, and that increased by 1% next year to 46%, then increased by 1.25% next year to 47.25%, then 48.5%, and then I think about that point it stayed. And then in 2010, in the next NFC Award, the next NFC Award, the 7th NFC Award, which, as Ahmad said, which is only, NFC Awards are only for 5 years, but this has gone on for 15 years. The NFC Award said that the 57.5% of revenues will go to the provinces. So every $1 of tax, the 1 rupee of tax that you pay, 57.5 cents go to the provinces. In addition, the government actually has to finance AJK, the government has to finance Gilgit-Baltistan, the government has to finance Islamabad at times, and the government also has to finance KP. So even though KP is now part of the federal, even though FATA is now part of KP, So the KP's population has increased, and you would think that the provincial shares would adjust accordingly, but the provinces are getting the same percentage, and every expense of KP is still met out. Okay, every expense of FATA is still met out of federal KT, which was 93 billion or so when I was minister, 84 billion, sorry, when I was a minister last time. So every time, whatever the KP's money expenditures were, it's coming out of the federal government KT. Plus, the federal government also has to give 1% of the entire money to KP for war and terror. And plus, the federal government has to give 0.67% of the divisible pools division to Sindh for giving up octroi in the 1990s. So when the Sindh gave up this octroi, they get, so this is about 30 billion or so that they get every year, or 35 billion. So altogether, really, the federal government gives away 63% of the money that it collects in taxes. Plus, of course, in fact, more than that, and plus now the federal government collects a lot of levy. It turns out that the levy that you pay is not part of the divisible pool. The divisible pool consists of income tax, custom tariffs, and sales tax on goods. Services is obviously provincial. Now, obviously, 3 out of 4 provinces have decided that they will also tax international trade. So KP has 2% tax on exports and 2% tax on import. Sindh has 1.85% tax on import, and Balochistan has 2% tax on exports and 2% tax on imports. Just for reference, the federal government's take on imports is about 7%. So 2% being paid to KP or Balochistan, or 1.85% to Sindh is like a huge amount. Anyway, we come back. What is the issue? The issue is that we give so much money to the provinces that it basically impoverishes the federal government. One obviously option is that we should reduce federal government expenditures, and my friend here to my left will obviously talk about this. and when I think that one of the things we should do is actually that if you are going to change this NFC award, you should also say that the federal government expenditures should not exceed the rate of previous year's inflation. No current expenditure should increase the rate of previous year's inflation. So that it's not like that the money now is going from province to the federal and the federation is now spending, but the money has to be, and because of that, because IMF keeps saying that, you cannot have such large deficits. We've had deficits of 8% of GDP. When we have such large deficits, what happens is that the IMF then forces you to have taxes, or you're taking money out of the banking system, or the interest rates goes up. When you have to increase taxes because you have such large deficits, then you impoverish the people. And even though your tax of 38.5% on the highest salary, in which it starts only at 5 lakh rupees a month, and 61% tax on corporations and 49.5% tax on business individuals, these are unheard of taxes. I mean, Norway doesn't have 61% tax on corporations, and they provide cradle to grave services. But the point is that, we need to reduce the deficits, we need to reduce tax rates, and to do so, we need to reduce both federal expenses and provincial expenses. One proposition or proposal made by some people during the 27th Amendment was that the Sindh government had said that let the provinces give 500 billion back to the and that's really entirely the wrong solution, and I'll tell you why. The way we look at the national deficit, when you read in the newspapers, when Mehtab Haider writes, if the deficit is 6.2%, that 6.2% is actually federal deficit plus provincial surpluses. So the provincial surpluses offset federal deficits. If you ask the provinces to give you 500 billion, they will reduce their surplus by 500 billion, federal deficits will reduce by 500 billion, but the national deficit will stay where it is. The second thing is it's the marginal cost. Just as the marginal tax rate affects your incentive to work, the marginal cost of tax of giving money to the provinces means that for every 1 rupee, they have to give 60 paisas to the provinces. So think about it this way. 8,000 billion rupees is our deficit, federal deficit, okay? In order to bridge the 8,000 billion rupee deficit, how much money do they need to raise? They need to raise 20,000 billion, because 12,000 will go to the provinces. It's not like, yaar, tumko to de diya, we've given what you've given, now let us get our raise. So my proposal in the next NFC is that, because you can't take money out of politicians, so let them have what they have, but for the incremental dollars that they will tax from us, let federal government keep 80 cents to the dollar until the deficit, goes down at least below 2-3% of GDP or below the economic growth rate. Otherwise, we keep on increasing our deficits and we are in a credit crunch. Now I want to show you, Akhtar bhai graph dikha do yaar. So, I'll just एक second लगी. ये वो बेटा वो ग्राफ दिखा दो. ये मेरे एक दोस्त है सवेल हुसैन, जिसने ये ग्राफ बनवाए. ये देखें बेटा, ये बलूचिस्तान का है. ये देखिए, ये ब्लू लाइन इज टेलिंग यू द चेंजेस इन मनी गिव. दिस इज फ्रॉम 2000, व्हाट इज इट, कौन सा वाला है, 2005 to 2020. This the blue line is telling you the increase in money going to Balochistan, every yearly increase, and the niche wali line is telling you the changes in HDI, Human Development Index. Human Development Index includes income, health, and education, right? So if you give more money to the provinces, you would think that with more money, more HDI will go, but that's not what we see. Agla wala graph dikhao beta. This is sin. It's slightly negatively correlated. Javed Saab should not be laughing. उसके बाद वाला दिखाओ. ये कौन सा है? KP Khurram would be happy. This is also negatively correlated. इसके बाद वाला दिखाओ. और खुरम पंजाब भी negatively. Sorry. So 3 out of 4. अच्छा, अब उसका टेबल दिखा दो बेटा. देखो ये जो है ना, ये 2005 से 2010 का नंबर है. दोनों नंबर दिखा दो, ठीक. तो 2005 से 2010 का नंबर है और 2005 से 2010 के नंबर के अंदर, ठीक है, 2005 से 2010 के अंदर इट्स अ वेरी स्मॉल स्लाइट पॉजिटिव कोरिलेशन के 1 रुपी 1% इंक्रीज, 10% इंक्रीज इंक्रीजेस दीज थिंग्स बाय 1%. 2010 के बाद 2020 तक आगे वाला ग्राफ दिखा दो बेटा. हाँ, 2011 से 2020 का जो है उसके अंदर नेगेटिव कोरिलेशन है 3 प्रोविंसेस की, और चौथे प्रोविंस की जो पॉजिटिव कोरिलेशन है बलूचिस्तान की, दैट इज आल्सो नॉट स्टैटिस्टिकली सिग्निफिकेंट. सो इट्स नॉट कि आप पैसे दे रहे हैं, वफाक पैसे दे रहा है, या आप लोग पैसे दे रहे हैं, वफाक नहीं दे रहे, तो आपके पैसे हैं ना. साकिब शिराजी साहब पैसे दे रहे होते हैं, मुसद्दक भाई भी मजबूरन पैसे दे रहे होते हैं. एंड आई वांट टू कंग्रेचुलेट एंड थैंक मुसद्दक जुल्करनैन साहब, कसम खुदा की, ठीक है, for reducing our tax rates from export development by 0.25%, which after 60% tax is effectively only 0.1%. हम 0.1% पे तालियां बजा रहे हैं, ठीक है. So I apologize, but 1 मिनट और दे दो, आधी मिनट और दे दो. So the thing is that ये इन पैसों से कोई फायदा नहीं हो रहा है. अगर इन पैसों से फायदा होता ना, तो आप उस पर बहस कर सकते हैं कैसर भाई की बात को कि यार हाँ, इस पैसों से बड़ा फायदा हो रहा है. देखो, बच्चे तालीमी याफ्ता हो गए. आपकी 10-15 साल के अंदर 58% से 59% लिटरेसी रेट बढ़ी है. आज भी आपका 2 करोड़ 70 लाख बच्चा स्कूल के बाहर है, और फिर वो 60 पेज के इश्तिहार आते हैं. तो यार, अगर चक्कर ये होता है कि फेडरल फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर के ऊपर प्रेशर ये होता है कि सारे मुल्क की गालियाँ हमको पड़ती हैं कि टैक्स बढ़ा दिया, टैक्स बढ़ा दिया. इनफैक्ट वो प्रोविंशियल लोग गालियाँ हमको दे रहे होते हैं, पैसे उनको जा रहे होते हैं. तो ये अपना खुद टैक्स जमा करो. खुद तो जमा नहीं करते, खुद तो जमा ये करते हैं कि ट्रेड पे टैक्स लगा देते हैं, प्रॉपर्टी टैक्स ये नहीं लेते, एग्रीकल्चर टैक्स ये नहीं लेते. इस साल फिर एग्रीकल्चर टैक्स जो है वो इन्होंने डिले कर दिया. सो द थिंग इज कि वो अपना काम तो करते नहीं, और इन पैसों से डॉक्टर इशरत हुसैन इसके बाद इंशाल्लाह पहले इंटरवेंशन करेंगे और बताएंगे कि कितनी एम्प्लॉयमेंट बढ़ गई है सूबों के अंदर. ये 2020 तक इसलिए डेटा है कि वो डेटा उसके पास उधर तक मिला था. ये डेटा कंपाइल करने में थोड़ा देर लगता है. इसमें कोई वो नहीं है, कोई भी चीज़ अच्छी नहीं हुई है, मैं आपको यकीन दिला रहा हूँ, ठीक है. कोई भी चीज़ अच्छी नहीं हुई. हर साल जो है नंबर ऑफ किड्स आउट ऑफ स्कूल बढ़ते ही रहते हैं. और हम तुम इधर उधर ना देखो, मैं ये बोलूँ कि कोई चीज़ अच्छी नहीं हुई तो नहीं हुई ना, क्या कर सकते हैं, ठीक है. 3% की ग्रोथ तो तुम दे नहीं सकते हो. चलो, सो दिस इज माई इंटरवेंशन.
I think an excellent conversation starter, and a few things that Miftah Saab mentioned. He showed you the changes in HDI post-evolution. Now, I started my political career as a local councillor, and then I ran for MPA because there were no local governments. So in this interim period, I was doing advocacy for local governments, and we used to show this slide in a presentation, in a pitch deck, wherever we would go, that Pakistan is lagging behind the rest of the world in terms of SDG attainment. So 3 years ago, we were ranked at 123rd out of 167 countries. So the year after, एक और प्रेजेंटेशन थी कि नेशनल असेंबली की स्टैंडिंग कमेटी के पास, तो मैंने कहा ज़रा नंबर्स चेक कर लें, तो हम गिर गए हुए थे 132 पे. फिर अभी रिसेंटली इन स्टैंडिंग कमेटी ऑन लोकल गवर्नमेंट आई गेव अ प्रेजेंटेशन, तो मैंने कहा यार फिर अपडेट कर लूँ. तो इस वक्त पाकिस्तान इज़ एट 140 out of 167, and every year we are slipping 5 to 8 places when the world is entering into that last final lap for SDG attainment. इसी तरह आपने PRE fiscal उसकी revenue generation की सूबों की बात की. There's a very important stat that I want to throw out, के which most of you would know, कि the city of Chennai in India, which is the size of Lahore, generates more property tax than all of Punjab. All of Punjab. So, Dr. Kaiser Bengali, इसी से जो एक सवाल, एक तो broader theme पे आप बात करें, but इस पे भी रोशनी डालें कि 7th NFC award happened alongside 18th Amendment, post Charter of Democracy reforms. And जो हम एक फेडरेशन की बात करते हैं, Pakistan is supposed to be a 3-tiered federation. So this NFC award was not just for the provinces. It also contained that money that had to go down to the grassroots. इस पे भी रोशनी डालिएगा, please. Thank you.
Yeah, now it's on. Thank you. I'll first answer your immediate questions, and then I'll respond to Dr. Miftah. Yes, NFC and 18th Amendment happened side by side, and there was one common denominator in the two. Haji Adil, senator from Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, who was a member of the Constitution Committee working on the 18th Amendment draft, and he was also a member of NFC representing Balochistan. So he kept briefing us what is happening there. We were informed that this concurrent list is to be abolished, decided, and it was on that basis that the share of provinces was argued to be increased, because 47 items in the concurrent list, 40 were to go to the provinces. Now, the corresponding ministries and divisions in the center were to be abolished, and they have never been done. So when the federal government is crying like a baby that we don't have enough money, and all kinds of statistics you've been giving us, how they have to collect so much and give so much to the provinces, they have to start by cutting down their expenditures. I think some very sophisticated language has been used in the earlier sessions. It was said that our growth elasticity of expenditure is very low. Very beautifully put. Basically, it means there is a lot of wasteful expenditure. There are about 20 ministries that need to be completely abolished. And I was a member of the federal government's committee on reducing federal expenditure from May 2024 to November 2024 when I resigned in protest, because there was just a talk shop, nobody intended to do anything. But during that time, I had complete access to data in the finance ministry, and I compiled a list of 60 attached departments that are doing nothing. They have to be abolished. That they have not done. And now everybody is blaming the provinces for creating a federal crisis. So that's my first response to that. The other thing you said about local government and 3-tier, nowhere in the NFC document there's even a word of the 3rd tier or giving money to local government. It's just not there. The subject of local government has nothing to do with NFC. The reason, and I've been saying this for more than 10, 15 years, and now for the first time, a political party, the MQM, has put in something on that. The problem with local government is that it is not in the constitution. There is only one line in the constitution. There is a chapter on the federal government, a chapter on the provincial government, which defines the structure, powers, function, financing of these two levels of government. There is nothing about local government. So what we need is a chapter on local government, which outlines the structure, the powers and the functions and how they will be financed. So if there is an NFC, there also has to be a PFC, and it has to be in the constitution. Then no provincial government can go around it. Today, provincial governments can change anything and everything by one notification. You know, Punjab took away health and education from local government a long time back when they created these health authorities and education authorities. Then they created a private company to collect garbage, and then sin also followed. It can do this because provincial governments have no definition of what they can or cannot do. So that's the problem. But it has nothing to do with NFC. Now, to answer your questions, I did not intend to get into this debate, but since you have given this, and you've given some data, I also work with data. I can also give all kinds of data and graphs. The point is that this is negatively correlated. The money the provinces get from the provinces, from the federation, and this is a completely wrong way of looking at analysis. With all due respect, Miftah साहब, मैं जब पढ़ रहा था तो एक एग्जाम्पल हमें दिया गया, स्टेटिस्टिक्स की क्लास थी, that beer consumption or whiskey consumption in Philippines has gone up by so much percentage, but GDP has not gone up by that percentage. So what's the use of drinking whiskey? This is an actual example in a textbook that is given. ये उसी किस्म का एग्जाम्पल है. अगर सिविल सोशल सर्विसेज इम्प्रूव नहीं हुई है, आपका ख्याल है कि सिर्फ पैसा डालने से ठीक हो जाएगा? अगर सिर्फ पैसे देने से चीज़ें ठीक हो जाती तो हमें तो बाहर दुनिया से बहुत पैसे मिले, हर चीज़ ठीक हो जानी चाहिए थी. और ये जो लास्ट सेशन था उसमें बहुत वाज़े कहा गया कि इंस्टीट्यूशंस और स्ट्रक्चर्स नहीं है तो हम पैसा दे के भी कुछ नहीं कर सकते, और ये बहुत एक्सप्लिसिटली कहा गया था लास्ट सेशन में. The point with education and health is that the governance structures are simply not aligned for proper governance. And the state is rotten to the core. The state, no MPA or MNA has lost an election because it did not provide education or health. जो इलेक्टोरल स्ट्रक्चर है आपका, आप इलेक्शन में टीचर्स को नॉमिनेट करते हैं फॉर इलेक्शन ड्यूटीज़. सो दोज एस्पायरिंग पॉलिटिशियंस, विद नो डिसरिस्पेक्ट टू अहमद हियर, they want their people to be appointed as teachers because when come election they will be the election officers. So वो टीचर क्या पढ़ाएगा? उसने कुछ नहीं पढ़ाना. So I think the issue with to say that NFC is not working because health statistics have not gone up better or education is not, are two completely different things. You just cannot compare. It's like whiskey and GDP. And I've served in two provincial governments. I've served in the federal government and I've served in two provincial governments. Brief period, but and my 40 years of research has involved me with at all levels of government. And there is not a single district in Pakistan which I have not visited in those 40 years to collect data and work. So the issues are completely institutional. It has nothing to do with आप इस वक्त भी पैसे दे दें, डबल कर दें पैसे, तो ये रिजल्ट नहीं आएगा. When I was appointed advisor to Sen Chief Minister in January 2010, उस वक्त उनका डिफेंस एजुकेशन का बजट 40 अरब का था, 80 अरब का था. एजुकेशन मेरा पोर्टफोलियो नहीं था, इट वॉज प्लानिंग एंड डेवलपमेंट. बट आई टोल्ड द चीफ मिनिस्टर मुझे आधे पैसे दें, मैं तालीम ठीक कर दूंगा, इसलिए कि पैसा मसला नहीं है. तो ये एक तो ये बात है. लेकिन मैं इससे थोड़ा डिबेट को आगे ले जाना चाहता हूँ. मैं थोड़ा डिबेट को आगे ले जाना चाहता हूँ. 7th NFC में सारा जो battle था वो who gets how much. It was probably needed at that time because the NFC formula was heavily loaded in favor of one province, and the other three provinces were complaining for the last 25, 30 years, but 7th NFC addressed that to some extent. I think having breached that barrier of who gets what, I think we now need to move forward. You know, I would say that we must now think about not who gets what. We must think about how NFC can be used as a tool for social development. And I have two proposals for the 11th NFC if they can come around to considering that. Our tax structure is very regressive. It taxes the poor more rather than the rich. Everybody recognizes that. Now, since it is easy to collect indirect taxes than to collect direct taxes politically and also technically in some ways, all governments rely on indirect taxes to generate revenue because it is easy to collect. You know, you don't have to go house to house. It's collected everywhere across the board. So my proposal is that we split the divisible pool जिससे पैसे जाते हैं into direct tax and indirect tax. Direct tax का जो sharing है वो 80% center रखे और 20% province रखे और जो indirect है वो reverse कर दें 80% सूबों को दें 20% center रखें. So the center will have an incentive to concentrate more on direct taxes than on indirect taxes. And this will help to move the tax structure, make it relatively more progressive than it is now. The other case that we can have is to have a percentage of forest acreage by province. Then provinces will have a incentive to increase the forest area. This basically is the environmental agenda that comes out. Rather than cutting forests. Sindh में तो बड़े पैमाने पे forest काटे हैं. The entire forest belt in the Kacha area has disappeared. Yeah. So, but then if you put it as part of the NFC, it may have some impact. There's another proposal that has come up. Both these I have actually worked on. I've calculated the numbers. Both these will not change the absolute amount of money the center and the provinces get. So there should be no objection from anywhere. But there's another proposal that has come up. I think population growth is another area which is being cited, that because the weight of population in NFC is 82%, there is no incentive. Last point. No incentive for to reduce population. उसकी जो proposal ये आया है कि inverse of fertility rate को as a criteria करे. I have not worked on this. This is somebody else's proposal. But I think my closing statement here is that rather than trying to bicker on who gets what and whose fault it was and whose fault it wasn't, because there are enough fractures in our society and our politics, let's get out of that. Let's talk about what more NFC can do to advance the social development agenda.
No, thank you very much. I don't know if I should say this or not, but I am a representative of a provincial assembly. And when I go see the offices of the deputy commissioners in the districts and the district police officers and the secretaries of the provincial government, and then I come to Islamabad, and sometimes once in 6 months I visit my father's office in Pakistan Secretariat, who is a federal minister. तो मुझे लगता है कि मैं किसी बहुत डेवलप्ड मुल्क से किसी बहुत गरीब मुल्क में आ गया हूँ जब मैं फेडरल गवर्नमेंट में के आके दफ्तर देखता हूँ. और गाड़ियाँ देखता हूँ और दफ्तर देखता हूँ. But just anyway, on a lighter note, so taking the conversation forward to Shahid Saab, Nasim Beg Saab, as an investor and as someone who represents the market, if you were advising the government, what is the most important reform that could improve investor confidence and long-term fiscal sustainability in the country?
So let me just make a comment first. Miftah ने डॉक्टर साहब का कहा कि वो उनके लेफ्ट पे बैठे हैं, तो मैं डॉक्टर साहब के लेफ्ट पे बैठा हूँ, despite being the investor. Okay. So, but a couple of very quick points, and then I'll get into recommendations. पहली चीज़, ये जो governance है, it needs to be closest to the people as close as is possible. वो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन से हो जिस तरीके से भी करें, बट ज़रूरी है. The other point I'll make is further to what Dr. Saab has said is the tax structure. It needs to be far more equitable, both in terms of killing the poor with the indirect taxes, as well as a few captive direct taxpayers, which means the documented industry and the salaried class. सारा बोझ उन पे डाल दिया है. वो कहते रहते हैं कि जी टैक्स टू जीडीपी रेशो तो वहीं खड़ा है. वो जीडीपी ग्रो कर रहा है बिकॉज सर्विसेज और ग्रो किए जा रही हैं जहाँ से ज़्यादा टैक्स नहीं आता है. तो वो सारा फिर नज़ला उतरता है कैप्टिव्स पर. तो वो भी स्लेव्स ही हैं गरीबों की तरह. वो भी फंसे हुए हैं उस स्ट्रक्चर में. तो टैक्स स्ट्रक्चर को जब सही करेंगे, जो डॉक्टर साहब ने कुछ फॉर्मूला सजेस्ट किया उसमें उसको मद्देनज़र रखना होगा. तो सही तरीका एक ही है कि ऑल फॉर्म्स ऑफ वेल्थ क्रिएशन, एंड आई एम नॉट सेइंग इनकम, wealth creation must be taxed. That means people sitting on assets which grow in value because of the inflation the government creates must also then bear a brunt of that tax. Now, getting into my recommendations, देखिए मेरी नज़र में जो बहुत बड़ा मसला है आपके फिस्कल अकाउंट में, वो आपका crippling government debt है. Okay, sorry, I'll do that. So, if we take the last 10 years, out of every 100 rupees that were collected in tax over the 10-year period and aggregate, 67 rupees went to pay towards interest. The last closed year, almost entire tax collected went to pay towards interest. So that's something we need to address, and I would also want, prior to getting into distributing the NFC, also start focusing on allocation of foreign exchange reserves, because that too has detrimental effects, and I'll come to that. Now, specifically in terms of the crippling debt, ideally, and I recognize all the eminent economists who are sitting here and who were on this panel earlier, but I will say what I've said earlier to them privately, and I'll say it publicly, that ideally we need to get out of debt creation of money, which means the fractional reserve banking in short term. The only way that we create money right now is through debt, whether private sector borrowing or government borrowing. And since government is the predominant borrower, all borrowing is money creation, and that is what feeds into inflation. Then that in turn causes us to have more rupees chasing dollars and devaluations and further rounds of inflation and high interest rates, which kills industry as well. So it's crippling everyone. Ideally, we should do away with that. Yes, of course, there is the current existing viewpoint that no, it is only when the government is disciplined through borrowing and having to pay the interest that it disciplines itself, and the central bank can act independently. But both are myths in my view. The central bank is an organ of the state, and there's a contradiction into thinking that the central bank will act otherwise. It is known to do those long-dated OMOs, and we know the repercussions. as regards the state having to pay or the government having to pay the price, no, it's the rest of us who pay that at the end of the day. So the state doesn't feel the pain. So what if we didn't have debt creation of money, still try to control the money creation through the same central bank, as independent as it can be, and all you would do is you would have saved that 9 trillion rupees that you collected in taxes and paid it off in interest. So, however, since I realize there's going to be huge sort of resistance to that, my next recommendation then would be, as an alternate, is to reprofile our debt. And by that, I mean essentially the debt, government debt held by financial institutions, and I don't mean to kill their balance sheets, so it'll have to be restructured in a manner that the extended period, the net present value basis, banks, etc., don't lose out. Now, one way forward would be to individually sit down with banks, take over the existing paper and hand back longer maturity paper, but repeat with the proviso that the longer maturity paper will not impact the net present value of their balance sheets, so they don't get banks getting killed overnight. So that would be my way forward to deal with that. However, that means you're just kicking the can down the road, and it means we need to spend that time fixing all the things that have already been talked about. So it's not just get complacent and forget about all the corrective actions that we need. Obviously, if we opt for that thing and the burden from the divisible pool or the overall budget goes down, then the federal government stops bothering the provinces to reduce their share because it doesn't have that big problem anymore. So remove that rather than do other things. I'll now come to the foreign exchange allocation. Right now, when the NFC award takes place, and of course in Pakistan rupees, the provinces go and spend on big projects which might need dollars, major amounts, and then into perpetuity dollars to keep some of those projects running. That drain the responsibilities on the federal government to arrange those dollars. But it doesn't end there. A few years later, as the rupee we know will devalue given our circumstances, the higher rupee cost of debt service will fall on the federal government, not on the provinces. So we need to, while we are doing this NFC award, also find a mechanism of making sure that the foreign exchange allocations are done and that provinces don't go and just carry out vote-winning projects, but projects that will hopefully earn back some of those dollars. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Nasim Saab, for sticking to the time limit. And I think that's a very good segue. We move towards Shahid Mahmood Saab, who served as Finance Secretary. And Shahid Saab, you have actually been involved in the National Finance Commission negotiations at the Finance Ministry. Can you share with us how, the actual process plays out, and what are the considerations, what are the constraints of the process as someone who's been a part of it? There's been talk about, the weight allocations, especially population. I think we need to talk more about population. It has kind of become a perverse incentive because it weighs so heavily in the share of the provinces that provinces do not have any incentive now to work on population management. Not only that, but also your number of constituencies in a province or in a district depend on your share in the population. So actually, Pakistan has been doing really well in terms of population growth rate. It's continuing unabated. I would also like you to touch upon that and how that could be addressed.
Right. Thank you very much for the introduction and the areas that you would like me to talk about. Some of the things that I would like to share is that if you look at the NFC awards, they've had varying meanings for both the federal and the provincial governments in our history. Till a certain point, federal government was the major partner in this. Most of the revenues would come to the federal government, and the provinces would get their share according to the award that was done. But mostly it was the federal government which would keep it. And then federal government also had the advantage that it can borrow while the other jurisdictions were not in a position to borrow from the market. But these were also the times when the provincial government would ask for and get funds over and above the award share. And I think Moeed mentioned that in his talk in the morning, that there was a time when we were getting so much of funds that, but we were restricted not to. I was not at that time taking these decisions or part of it, but that's the history that I've tried to trace in this. That the funds were available, and the provinces would come and ask for us from the federal government, and these were allocations which were made in the federal budget under the head other grants for provinces. And so perhaps when we talk about lack of discipline or fiscal discipline in the provinces, maybe that might have a reason. This might be the reason which it has caused. But then came the 7th NFC. And 7th NFC has I think it has the way it has moved away from the past, from the population basis. It has now come down to other factors also. So we have 4 parameters on which. So apart from the 82.5% of weightage for population, there are 3 other weightages also. But during this time, it also happened that when this vertical distribution took place, much of the funds in the 7th NFC went to the provincial governments. And I will share with you some of the statistics later, how it has really distorted the fiscal picture. And when within in the finance division, one spoke to people that how was this award arrived at, because it distorted many things. The answer that I got was that from people who were in charge at that time, that the finance division reluctantly agreed to the award, which was finalized eventually, so they were not really into it completely, what the eventual award was. But 1 or 2 things which the federal government was not able to do was that it was supposed to, for instance, take the tax to GDP ratio to 15%, and that was agreed in the award. We've not been able to do that, and so we still are at 9 to 10%. That's where we are, or maybe 11% now. So that's one area, and the other is the cutting of the expenditure. The current expenditure, I would not say development, but current expenditure was a major part, and both these goals still remain aspirational. not much has happened so far in this. So, increase in provincial shares has also caused regional disparities and lopsided development between the provinces, and I think that's perhaps a correction that has to be done in the upcoming award. Now, the statistics that I thought I'll share with you, for the 16 years that the award has been in practice, for 4 years, the first year and the third year, there was no surplus. In fact, more expenditure was made compared to, and then later, 2016 to 18, more expenditures were made because perhaps the elections were coming up. But apart from that, provinces have held healthy budgetary surplus for all those 12 years, other than the 4 years that I've spoken about. The last year, which is 24-25, the total budget, the total surplus was 921 billion rupees. And so, of course, it was perhaps at a place where it was not supposed to be. It should have gone to, the money was lying at the wrong place. So that's one part. The other part is that in 2008, our total debt was 6.127 trillion, which was 48.4% of GDP. And then in the last year, 25, it's risen to 80.518 trillion, and which is 70% of GDP, compared to, and for 2 years, the peak that we achieved was 76% at one point in time. Last year was 70. So these are some of the, what I'm trying to mention here is that this thing caused a buildup of debt and at one place, and healthy surplus at the other place. So this needs to be corrected in the upcoming award. There are a few other things that I would like to talk about, but you've been okay. Right.
सवाल में मैं इतना कह दूं कि कैसर भाई एकदम मेरी बात ही कर रहे थे कि इतना पैसा देने से कोई एजुकेशन तो नहीं बड़ी, फायदा तो कोई नहीं हुआ, तो पैसा क्या हमने क्या 60 पेज के इश्तिहार देने के लिए थोड़ी दे रहे हैं, और वफाक नहीं दे रही, पैसे हम लोग दे रहे हैं. It's our money that's going. And if there is no education improvement, if there is no health improvement, then what is the point of giving all these budgets?
जब एजुकेशन हेल्थ वफाक के पास था, उन्होंने कौन सा तीर मार लिया?
नहीं, तो ये तो हम इतने ज़्यादा पैसे दे रहे हैं, और दूसरी बात जो ये कह रहे हैं कि वफाक के खर्चे कम करो, उस पर आई टोटली एग्री. बट वफाक का सिविलियन गवर्नमेंट रन का बिल जो है ना वो 700 अरब रुपए है, वफाक का डेफिसिट 8000 अरब रुपए है. तो अगर आप पूरी सिविलियन गवर्नमेंट बंद कर देंगे तो यू ओनली ब्रिंग डाउन 8% ऑफ
सिविलियन बंद नहीं करना, डिफेंस को भी करना है. डिफेंस इज एन इशू दैट नीड्स टू बी ब्रॉट डाउन.
On that note,
which is not being mentioned here. I also want to point out, Javed Saab, there is a lot of talk about how the private sector is being, compromised by the public sector. There has not been a single word about the military's enterprises which is compromising the private sector. 5 months of negotiations were to break this single criteria formula, and we could only get Punjab to agree to that much reduction. The other, I fully agree with you, the other 3 criteria, it's very nominal, but our objective was to break the single criteria formula and then work on that later. When in Sindh, I was representing Sindh. In Sindh, there was the same criticism. 5% सिर्फ हमें दिया इन्होंने. ने कहा पहले इसको तोड़े, बाद में शेयर पे बात करेंगे. और पॉपुलेशन पे देखें, बात ये है कि when parents decide to have a size of a family, they don't open the NFC formula to see what the NFC share is. And when provinces are not concentrating on reducing population, it's nothing to do with NFC. It is the mullah power which does not allow them to do it.
I think this was a very interesting discussion, and I thank all the participants.